Hi, my name is Josh Beckman, and we're here at VIVA Unscripted with Misti Malone from the FDA. We're going to be talking about some of the government and regulatory things that are happening. And I think we can just start off by asking the most simple of questions. What's new and where are we going?
So there's lots new at CDRH. So I'm with the Center of Devices, and we have a number of initiatives and projects that we've been working on, but now they're being implemented more broadly. So we have early feasibility studies promoting early studies in the U.S. As opposed to going overseas. And for these, our group works very interactively with the company to develop a device evaluation strategy, so it's just-in-time testing. At what testing do we need at which stage? Complementary to this, we also have the early access pathway, which is for breakthrough technology. Once again, these technologies typically meet an unmet clinical need, and there may be less known from a clinical perspective, so how can we build confidence with preclinical testing before initiating studies in patients without being overly burdensome in a very novel territory. We also have real-world evidence, which is I'm very excited about because I believe there are a number of registries that are collecting very valuable information in a real-world population to eventually expand indications and inform both the regulatory bodies but also clinical practice. So that way we can give patients the best we can.
So it seems to me that one of the big trends, the larger trends in this whole field and with the FDA in general, has been a greater emphasis on collaboration, whether it's collaboration with other regulatory agencies here and abroad, collaboration with physicians, collaboration with industry. Where do you think the points of entry are into working with the FDA if you're someone who's never done that before?
That's a good question. So we typically work with very small companies and very large companies. So for small companies, we sometimes do a bit more hand-holding. Maybe they are less knowledgeable about the area or our processes. I can understand our processes can be challenging to understand what type of submission to submit and when. And so reaching out to either our division of communications or else the branch chief that may be involved with the project and submitting pre-submissions. So we have pre-submissions in which companies will come in, they show us our device, and if a picture is worth 1,000 words, seeing it in person is 1 billion. Being able to play with a stent, a delivery system, it enables us to review it and understand the device more efficiently. So coming in with pre-submissions and working with us early and often. So that's one entry point, but that's just working with us. So if companies would like to tack on maybe discussions with CMS, we are happy to facilitate those. We do work fairly closely with our CMS colleagues to both understand the early clinical trials and how this may inform CMS's decisions because their mantra is a little different from ours. And we also, I'm part of the Harmonization by Doing, and we work with our Japanese colleagues in PMDA to help make the process more efficient, potentially collect data that would be valuable and informative in both countries. So I'm not the only one that is part of all these different groups. A number of branch chiefs and reviewers are. So reaching out to your group and beginning those discussions, don't be scared to tell us what you are doing and to tell your story. Many of the companies with early devices, there's a reason they made their device the way it is. And explaining that whole story will help us understand why it's engineered that way and where you're going with your device. So don't be scared to speak to us.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. If I'm someone who's created something in my basement, and then I've gone and created a small company to make it into a real device, not just a prototype I made out of toilet paper rolls. And then I think I'm ready at this point to begin to consider it either in animals or some preclinical setting. Is what you're saying to me that I can call you guys up, show you how I've gotten to where I've gotten, and I'm going to get sort of some direction as to where to go next?
Maybe not a complete direction on where to go next, but feedback on what you've done thus far and what may be the helpful next steps. So Typically, if there's no guidance document or standards available, a company will do 3 tests. Just say they do these 3 tests. And from our experience with either that device type or that disease type, we might suggest you also do these other 2 tests. And in doing so, it will inform you more about your own device and how it works. And there's also opportunity, we have on occasion said, we've seen something like that. You may want to consider modifying your device, or it's fine, you can try it. But we have seen some of these issues before, and we are more than willing to provide that feedback if we can.
So I will actually ask my next question in a minute.
Yes.
Okay, so that's actually very helpful. One of the complaints over time, which I think has been getting a lot better, is the time from new concept to actual clinical use. Can you describe some of the programs in the beginning as to how you're sort of speeding things up for faster modification and approval? Obviously, things have to be safe before we'll ever let them get into the clinical space. But can you describe to some of the folks in the audience how we are, what are the ways that the FDA is minimizing that time from discovery to the bedside?
So those early discussions, I wish we had data showing how it minimized time, but I know just in working with companies, when they have those discussions early, say you have to do a 6-month animal study, but you've missed 5 endpoints. You'll have to repeat that 6-month animal study, maybe not, unless you have appropriate rationale, but that's 6 months that's lost. Had a company come to us before that would have been more efficient. So that helps make the preclinical testing more efficient. But also the clinical study, in order to, we also review statistical analysis where we're considering novel statistical designs, Bayesian statistics, adaptive trials, imbalanced randomization schemes, and trying to understand both the disease state and the patient population and the whole device evaluation strategy helps to make the process more efficient and reduce time.
Perfect. So I also want to introduce Tamara Syrek Jensen from CMS. It's very difficult to be very popular in your last session. I'm so glad you were able to make it to this one.
It's my first session, so I hope I do better.
Even better. And you come at the perfect time. Because what I'd really like to get into a little bit now is the methods of collaboration between the 2 different agencies and how you are working together to make the system smoother, I would say. Maybe, I don't care who starts, one of you just take off.
Well, I can start. So I think that the method, and I think all three of us have talked before in separate venues, but I think we started our collaboration starting in 2010, and we have really come a long way in 2017. And there are just now the conversations between CMS and FDA, it's really just as simple as us now picking up the phone. They're very collaborative. Now FDA doesn't pick up the phone and say, who are you? Maybe we'll get back with you. Because it's now part of our culture to really start this conversation very early. Mm-hmm. And then part of the conversation, which I think is very beneficial to stakeholders, is, well, maybe we need to now invite the stakeholder into this conversation. So one of us, usually it's the FDA because that's who they contact first. Well, they'll contact the stakeholder and say, is it okay if CMS as a payer comes in, starts to be part of these meetings with you? And I think that has been very beneficial not only for us to hear FDA's side, what are they reviewing, what are some of their concerns, but also hearing from the sponsor, saying, okay, here is an innovative device that may meet an unmet need, and then what we'll say is, all of that is great, here are some really important questions for us if you want to come to Medicare in order to get payment and coverage. And so we'll try to go over some of those types of things. And it's certainly a business decision in the end, but we've also tried to be very creative in trying to get there.
So let me ask this question. I want to just make very clear for the audience how the missions differ between the 2 organizations, because I think sometimes there's some confusion as to why when something may be deemed safe, it may not be worth being purchased by an organization who's providing the health care for the Medicare population. So just in a brief way, because we could talk about this all day, but tell us the different orientations when we're looking at new things.
The level of information we expect is for a PMA device is safety and effectiveness. So does it reach that threshold? And also the benefit risk. So safety isn't a line in the sand. It's not this bar that has to be jumped over. It's based on the benefit, the level of benefit, and the level of risk. So I guess that's our mission when it comes to PMAs.
Yeah, this is really, it's a really good question. And we have written a lot of congressionals and a lot of, and it is very different. And it's really come, a little separately from here, but it's really come very distinct when we're starting to talk about molecular diagnostics. And I know that's different here, but that has really become crystal clear. But that is why FDA CMS partnership is so important, because what FDA does is so important to what we do in my group. They determine, is it safe and is it effective? Does it do what it says it does? Because if they don't do that, then we need to figure out, does it do what it says it does? You can tell us whatever you want, but we need to know that it does that. That's just first part of the equation. Now when it comes to CMS, and my guess is any payer, now we need to say, okay, it does what it says it does, but does it improve health outcomes? Is it something that is beneficial for, at least for me, Medicare? Is it beneficial to the 65 and older or the disabled? And that's the part why it's so good that we work together so that it's more streamlined and we take away that time that it gets from between FDA market approval and CMS coverage. We want to narrow that time down so it's more streamlined, so perhaps there is no gap there.
I think one of the things that it would be really helpful for the audience to appreciate, and I have come to appreciate as my exposure has been a bit more than it was before, is that this has really been an iterative process over time, and that although sometimes it may be frustrating that there isn't a single very short paragraph description of what's necessary, the reason that that's the case is that there is no single short description of what is important for each different new thing. And so I very much appreciate the change in time, the change over time, because of the increased exposure between both agencies and then with the other stakeholders in the industry. And that's been, I think, an incredibly impressive and yet sort of underreported event. Okay, so I already asked Misti, so I'm going to ask you now, where are things going? What do you think is new and what's going to...
Wow,
yeah.
You're asking the healthcare system where things are going. That's a really big question.
No, I'm going to actually make it much more narrow because I can't tell you, I'm not going to make this an impossible question. But in terms of bringing in some new therapeutics, and I'm limited specifically to the vascular space, what are some of the newer things that you're looking at to try and help you make the decision and maybe make the decision more quickly?
So I don't have, it would be hard for me to get into specific devices. I look to folks like you to tell me that. I mean, you helped us move along peripheral artery disease in our last decision that we made in our MedCAC. I mean, you were very integral in moving that to where it is today, and I think it's a very positive decision in that. So we really do look to stakeholders to educate us, because I'll be the first to admit I clearly don't know everything, or I would have been here on time. So we really look at others to help us figure that out and to figure out what's the next best thing. I don't know what it is right now. FDA helps us with that to figure all of that out.
One of the things I have to say, so it's been a really nice experience for me to be involved in things like a few different MedCACs now. But when you think that there's the government, you'd actually have no idea that you're meeting and discussing and interacting with, nice and normal people who show up to do their job every day. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but I think it really helps the more that you interact with the folks who are sort of in the audience, whether it's this close one or the larger one. Because, I think, I don't want to say this in the wrong way, there's politics, and then there's actually the people who get the work done. And the people who get the work done do incredible amounts of work that I think needs to be called out because I don't think it's appreciated enough. Okay, so enough with the cheerleader part of it.
Let me just say I agree with that, but what's so important is that it's a paradigm for everybody to engage.
Yeah.
And I was just mentioning this to my bosses, it's important that we all get out there and to talk. Because if we don't, then each of us is in our silos, and each of us thinks negatively about the others. Because emails are only as good as how you're portraying it in whatever. So it's so important to see people, and for us to learn from you, because we are trying to make it better. And unless someone tells us, well, you kind of got this wrong, we're not going to be able to learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's actually it's a two-way street. Mm-hmm. Because in the same way that you need a set of information and to be explained clearly enough so that it can be, you have to deal with every single medical problem. There's no way you could be an expert in every single medical area. In the same way that, at the FDA, there's no way that you're responsible for cancer chemotherapy, right? So everybody has to understand the specific area, and I understand that that's our job. But it is really through the conversation that I begin to understand what kinds of information you need to have that we can then go back and work on to move things forward. And I agree with you, getting out is really important.
I was going to add, it's also helpful to translate it from one disease state to another. So not staying just in your silo of your particular disease state.
Yep.
We've learned from the early feasibility studies on valves, on mitral valves, and how quickly that's moving, and translating that to our early feasibility studies and thinking of the same, what are we considering here, and what is the just-in-time testing that can be done to reduce the burden but have confidence in the initial safety. So seeing the entire picture and speaking with our colleagues outside, and we may learn something from cancer research. And as you said, that's not my specialty, but there's breakthrough technology there that we then can translate to our work.
Yeah, that's incredibly important. And I will say that my perspective is probably the narrowest because I live and breathe one kind of disease process all the time, which of course is by far the most important one.
Of course.
Yeah, by definition, especially here in this audience. Okay, that's actually really interesting. One, I know that you guys both go to some of the national meetings, and I'm sure, I think one of the things that I find most eye-opening is that when I go to the late-breaking sessions, and I see something incredible presented, not the negative study, not the, okay, it saved one life per 10 million people who were served, but the one or two things that may occur per large meeting that are like, wow, I'm going to do that the minute it's approved. And then you sit there for like 9 months, and a lot of this is a company issue. A lot of it is a company issue, but can you explain what happens in between presentation of, say, a big change in therapy and how we actually get to something that's available for use? Either one of you can take this hard question.
Yes.
That's a long question, because by the time you've seen that data, they've typically gone through most, if not all, of our processes, unless it's some of the feasibility data, and then they're beginning with a pivotal trial, and so we have some knowledge of that, and so that delay may be they've gathered that data, and now they're going through the PMA process, let's just say, and that's 6 months. Though we do our best to reduce the time, but sometimes it takes the full 6 months negotiating labeling. What does this data mean? And so that might be the 6 month, and then 3 months, at least 3 months, spinning it up. And that's more how the company can increase manufacturing, where they were manufacturing a couple hundred devices for the clinical trial, and now they're manufacturing thousands for the market release. So there's that timeline there, and I'm sure there's more with CMS.
So it's an interesting question. Honestly, when I hear something, that's one of the reasons I like this meeting. I'm not a clinician, and so what's so important to me, one piece of advice, when you come to CMS, so I manage a lot of clinicians, and then I'm not one, because you start with the evidence and you make it a policy. But I think when you come at least to CMS, to the coverage group, and I know I'm not quite answering your question, I promise I'll get there, it's really trying to put it in the language. You start with the evidence, but you want to make sure that you speak to a wide-ranging audience, from from strong clinicians to policymakers. So those are the folks you want in the room with us. We are definitely science-based. Our clinicians are going to ask you very, very tough questions. So I will say one of the reasons that I like attending this meeting is like some of these live cases. I really enjoy watching them. And usually when I see something that everyone thinks is late breaking, what I do is I go back and I'm really excited about it. And then the clinicians around the room, they go, I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah.
Is usually what they do. And so So now they're like, well, where's the evidence? And so that's how it starts. And we start searching, and we may talk to the FDA, and we really start grinding through all of that if it's something that's pretty exciting. And then we hope people will come and talk to us, but if it's something really big, we'll reach out.
Got it, okay. All right, I think I am ever more impressed at how active these things are. So it used to sort of feel like waiting for things to drop in the net, and now it's clearly fishing. I mean, it's going after the things that are interesting and exciting. And the idea now that you can go to FDA very early to help you figure out whether your, say, device is a go, no go, or how to take some steps. And then once you move forward, it seems like CMS is getting involved at an earlier and earlier phase to see if it is going to be go, no go. And it has, I know it has shortened things dramatically. Now, if you guys had one piece of advice for people, either for investigators in the field or for people creating new devices, what would it be?
We always say the same thing at FDA. Come early and often. Please speak with us. We're nice people. And my group is extremely motivated, interactive, and they want to help. They get excited by these devices, and whether they'll work or not. They're excited to help in the development and to see where this goes. So we want to help design the best strategy, to gather meaningful data. So come early and often.
And you're stealing my thunder from Tamara, which is, if I were a consultant, what would I tell you to do? So I have a lot of things. I have a list, but I won't go through that entire list. So my favorite piece of advice, and I think you've heard me say this before, evidence. Show us the evidence. Do not be superficial, and be honest, because we are going to be honest with you, whether it's positive or negative. I really don't shy away from hard conversations, because if we can have that hard conversation, we can move forward. And the goal is really to help the beneficiary in the end. And I love problem solving, and I like creativity. But we need to start with what is real, what is the evidence, and let's be honest about it. And then let's figure out if we can move forward. Some things can't move forward, but a lot of things can.
All right, I think our time is up. I want to thank both Tamara Syrek Jensen and Misti Malone for their participation in VIVA Unscripted. Enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.